So we have a special report about what else is happening. Take a look.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. A 7-year-old boy and his great-grandmother were reportedly killed by a convicted felon released on parole in Alabama. 52-year-old Jimmy O'Neill Spencer allegedly broke into the home of 74-year-old Marie Kitchens Martin and killed her and her great-grandson, Colton Ryan Lee. Spencer was released from prison in January after serving 20 years for a burglary conviction. Authorities believe Spencer is also responsible for another murder that occurred across the street from the double slaying. Spencer is charged with 4 counts of capital murder. A man in North Carolina was arrested after he allegedly tried to steal $100 of steak by stuffing the meat down his pants at a Nashville Walmart. 17-year-old Keith Jordan was arrested after trying to make a getaway on his moped with some serious beef in his undercarriage. Authorities have yet to formally charge Jordan. A couple charged in the death of their infant daughter after refusing medical treatment for the child due to religious reasons had their newborn child seized by Child Protective Services. The couple, Joshua and Rachel Pyland, are facing involuntary manslaughter charges in Lansing, Michigan for the death of their 3-day-old daughter, Abigail, who died of a jaundice-related illness after her parents refused treatment last year. The Pyland's newborn daughter, Verity, was diagnosed with a similar health condition and taken away after authorities were tipped off to the refusal of treatment. No date has been set for the involuntary manslaughter charges. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law & Crime.
As always, great reporting, Anthony. Go to lawandcrime.com to learn a little bit more of the top trending stories of the day. I want to talk more, though, right now about that infant case and about that religious couple, because we see this more and more, and we want to try to understand why it's happening. So joining me right now is attorney Jennifer Schuster to talk a little bit more about it. Jennifer, welcome to Law & Crime.
Good morning, Jesse. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So why do we see these cases happen more and more? I mean, is there a common perception out there that this is America? Your religious beliefs trump anything, including the welfare of your own children?
Sure. There is a common belief out there and a perception. And in fact, parents do have a constitutional right to raise their children the way they see fit. And that includes expressing certain religious beliefs. However, that interest in this case here is pitted against the state's interest to protect our children from harm and abuse.
You know what I'm surprised about? They got charged with the death of their first child. They were going to let the same thing happen to their second child? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. And luckily, in this instance, officials are citing what's called anticipatory neglect. And someone, we don't know whom, stepped in, some tipster, perhaps a mandatory reporter, a family member, and noticed that something, history was about to repeat itself, and something, again, detrimental would happen to this child. Interestingly enough, medical professionals are saying that this child, in fact, suffered from almost the exact same condition, some sort of jaundice-related condition that the other child died from about 1.5 years ago.
Do you think the involuntary manslaughter charge is the appropriate charge for their first baby who died? Is that the appropriate charge?
I do. I think it is. There was an intent to show, inflict bodily harm on this child. You know, the fact that they were out on bond and they were able to reproduce during this period is just what's so uncanny to me. As you probably know, these folks are also in the middle of unresolved parental termination rights as it relates to 2 other children, 2 older children.
Right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you wonder how anybody can have certain children. I mean, it's just, I don't understand a lot of it many times. But this case is interesting because how do they defend against this behavior? I mean, whenever I see a case where there is a child who dies and it was the responsibility of the parents, the child was in the custody of a parent or parents, you automatically assume that they are liable, they are responsible, and they will be found guilty. So how do these parents mount a defense?
You know, the defense has a tough road to hoe here because under the Michigan law, under child protection laws, they just need to prove that there was physical harm or even the threat of a harm and that these folks had an opportunity to rectify that harm and they failed to do that. And in this case, we know that the state stepped in. We know that they provided services. We know that they provided, in fact, a safety plan when it comes to the other 2 children. They were told that they needed to seek medical attention for the first child and also the second child, and they failed to do that.
It's a pretty remarkable case, and we're going to update anybody. We're going to update all of our viewers as soon as we have a new information about what's going to happen to this couple. We always bring these stories to you, and we'll always update you about what's happening. So, Jennifer, thank you. I want you to stand by, and we're going to switch gears right now. I want to talk more about the Anthony Kirkland case, since that will be one of our main trials today. And yesterday, as I said at the top of the program, the defense began their case. And what is their defense? They are saying that this man has an untreated mental illness, and that mental illness has to be considered when you, the jury, are determining whether or not this man should face the death penalty. Let's play a little bit of the defense's opening statement in case you missed it. Take a look. Good place to start for the day, the defense's opening statement, and we'll be live in that courtroom. Let me bring back in Jennifer Schuster. And Jennifer, I'm going to ask you point blank. I know we only have about a minute or so. Does this defense really work in the sentencing phase?
You know, I think most people would say probably not. We're talking about a guy who's convicted of killing 5 people. However, jurors want to know, why would somebody do this? You know, the prosecution has said that it's just pure evil and that it's almost incomprehensible. But the defense's argument, the crux of their argument, is that, well, it sort of is comprehensible when you look at the science. The brain images that we saw yesterday from the defense expert, Dr. Wu, the defense attorney referenced that we'd be hearing from experts, and we, in fact, have heard from some of those experts so far. Also, we talked about this man's childhood. So the defense is saying, really, there is a reason, a very obvious scientific-based reason that this man would be driven to commit these crimes. Is it going to fly with the jury? You know, it's possible, but I think most people would say probably not.
Yeah, it's hard to say one way or another. I've been wrong before. Viewers have been wrong before. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Now, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to play you some of the defendant's police interview. This police interview, we've watched, I think, maybe 3 of them. They're hours long. How gripping is it? It's extremely gripping, and we're following it word for word. And I want to bring back on Jennifer Schuster. And Jennifer, you're a great attorney. I'm sure you've seen police interviews before, and you've seen all different kinds. The tactics used by these investigators, I must say, was brilliant. The way that they rope him in, first appealing to his sense as a father, then to a religious sense, even saying, you know what, Anthony, I know you're a good guy, you're a decent man. What do you think about their strategy to get the information that they wanted?
Right. You can certainly see how the police are coaxing Anthony Kirkland in this instance, but they're doing it appropriately. These are perfectly acceptable interrogation techniques, effective interrogation techniques, and indeed did elicit a confession that lasted close to 9 hours. As you said, Jesse, we see him luring him in, appealing to his senses as a father, saying that also the mom and dad of the victims deserve to know what happened. And then he also goes back and he covers his tracks and he says, after Kirkland says, well, you're getting a confession out of me, the police officer says, well, let me make something clear. This is all up front. So he's being very clear on the record that this is not a coerced confession.
Why did he give up so much information so voluntarily? He was read his Miranda rights multiple times. Why did he not have an attorney? Why was he so good to give up that information? I'm still confused.
You know, that might be an argument for the defense to say that this goes toward his mental disease and defect, which, as you've been saying, is a mitigating factor here. So while we're listening to this confession, we're hearing the aggravating circumstances related to these crimes, but we're also hearing those nuggets that tell us about his mental state. And what the defense alleges is his mental disease, and what they say is a mitigating factor that outweighs the aggravating circumstances here.
Jennifer, you make a great point in talking about one of those nuggets. So he said that he burned these bodies not to get rid of the evidence, but because it was a proper burial rite, a spiritual rite, a proper burial ritual, kind of like the Vikings did. And I want our audience just to take a moment to process that, because as the defense keeps, as you said, keeps mounting the argument that this guy suffers from a mental disease or defect, from blows to the head as a young child and other circumstances, perhaps this is something that they should consider. Now, Jennifer, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, there is a lot more to discuss in the Anthony Kirkland case. You never see cases like this, so tune in. We have a lot to cover. We'll be back in a minute. So now you know how Anthony Kirkland was apprehended. Let's bring back on attorney Jennifer Schuster to talk a little bit more about it. You know, I can't believe, a part of me can't believe that this case even went to trial. The evidence against him was pretty strong. He was found in the area. He confessed on tape. Was this a case of maybe he just couldn't get a plea deal and had no choice but to roll the dice and see how a jury went?
Yeah, that's certainly possible. Sometimes there's no plea on the table. And the defendant has no choice but to proceed to trial.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case to listen to. I mean, how did he think that by lying about his name and his social security number, when he's found in the area where she's missing, and he's got steak knives sticking out of him, how did he think he could get away with this? Right.
I mean, the fact that he said he gave them a different name, and then he also said that he was homeless, that goes to show, though, that he had some level of rationality, perhaps some prior calculation or design, and in fact wasn't suffering from a mental defect. Because what do people who are rational, who commit crimes, do? If you can say there are people who are rational who commit these sorts of crimes, they lie about it. They try to hide it. And that is, in fact, what he did here. He tried to do here.
Well, I'm also curious to see today, or maybe even tomorrow, if he provides an unsworn statement to the jury like he did in his first case, where he said, I'm an evil person, I'm a monster. He admits it. He asked for mercy first time around. We'll see if he asks for mercy this time around. It'll be something to watch. This is really an interesting case. Now, Jennifer, stand by. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, there is a lot more to discuss in the Anthony Kirkland case, including his potential defense. And all he needs is one jury member to agree with him. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We have a live feed in the Anthony Kirkland case out of Ohio. We're just waiting for the trial to start up. We believe the testimony of Dr. Joseph Wu will continue. It is a taped deposition. It is very interesting. Now, this guy is brought forth by the defense to talk about how Anthony Kirkland suffers from a mental disease or defect that would affect his behavior, his impulse controls, his violent tendencies. For anybody who follows us here on Law and Crime, as I've said, you've probably seen this doctor before. He has testified for the defense in other cases, most notably, and maybe most recently, the Donald Smith case, where that guy was accused and convicted of killing a young girl, sexually assaulting her and killing her in a brutal fashion. Came forward by the defense to say that this guy also suffered from a mental disease or defect. Didn't work for him. The jury sentenced him, recommended a sentence of death. Will the same thing happen here? Let's find out. Let's go. Actually, I don't think it started yet. So I think we don't, it haven't started yet. So let's bring back on Jennifer Schuster. Jennifer, I'm going to bring you on real quick. Again, we've seen this guy before testify, you know, great doctor, but it doesn't always work. He can say that this guy has had blows to the head and psychological trauma, but it won't always convince a jury, right?
No, it certainly wouldn't. And yes, we've seen this doctor before in lots of high-profile capital punishment cases. But the bottom line is a lot of jurors will say, listen, even if there is a mental defect here, I don't believe that there's a causal relationship between this mental defect and the crimes that were committed, or I just don't buy this mental defect, period. I had a tough childhood, too. I had parents who were alcoholics, and I didn't turn out to be a criminal. And so there are many instances where this sort of testimony doesn't really serve the defendant that well.
And that argument that you just said is something that you see the prosecution argue a ton of times. They ask family members of the defendant, they're like, did you grow up to be a serial killer? No, you didn't. No, you did not. And it's the same thing. They ask jurors common sense questions like that. Okay, Jennifer, stand by. We're going to jump live now in that courtroom. We're going to listen to a little bit more of Dr. Joseph Wu. This is a live feed into the Anthony Kirkland case. Welcome back, everybody. Great timing. I'm so happy you're back here. Dr. Joseph Wu is back on the stand while he's being grilled by the state in a deposition that was prior recorded, and this is really interesting stuff. The state is questioning his analysis that they first question that most of the time he testifies for defendants, he always finds a traumatic brain injury, and now they're questioning the actual injuries sustained by Anthony Kirkland in this case and whether or not that had an effect on his brain. Before we jump live into the courtroom, I want to bring back in Jennifer Schuster. Jennifer, got to ask you a question about this. They're grilling him about the fact that in most of the cases that he testifies to, he always finds a traumatic brain injury. Is that a fair argument on their part?
Right. It is awfully curious. This defendant has significant criminal case experience, and he said that almost always he finds a traumatic brain injury. He said that in only 2 instances he found that there was not a traumatic brain injury. But then he quickly moves into his methodologies. He gets very technical. For a minute there was a lot of science, a lot of math. I think probably I was a little bit lost. I'm sure the jurors were. We do know that this expert is a medical hospital researcher. He's not a private researcher or hired expert per se. So I think probably the benefits of his testimony outweigh this perceived bias that the prosecution is trying to get.
Well, this back and forth is very interesting to watch. So let's go live into the courtroom right now. Gotta say, I love a good cross-examination, and that is what is happening here with Dr. Joseph Wu. Want to bring back in Jennifer Schuster to talk about it. What do you think about this cross-examination? Are they getting under Dr. Joseph Wu's skin?
I think they are. I think it's fairly effective. So what he's doing is he's questioning Dr. Wu where he got his information. He's questioning the timing, poking holes in those details about who said what when. You know, I think it would be effective here. You know, on direct, I know that the defense didn't have a chart, but there's a lot going on here. I mean, they're trying to lay out chapter and verse certain events that happened in Anthony Kirkland's life, the resulting behavior, what the scan showed, and then how Anthony Kirkland's behavior changed. And now, you know, the prosecutor is doing an effective job kind of muddling all of those events and challenging the timing and the details. I think that Dr. Wu is doing a pretty good job coming back in and cleaning this up. It's too bad that this is a video deposition and he's not there live, giving the defense an opportunity to go back and question him and clean up some of this testimony.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see if he is, if there is redirect on that video deposition. It's interesting to see. I know we lose a little bit of something when it's in a tape deposition as opposed to in the courtroom itself. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going straight back into that courtroom. Welcome back, everybody. This is exciting cross-examination. I want to talk to Jennifer Schuster. I want to bring her on to talk about this. I love this back and forth. And now he's being questioned about the fact this violent behavior from Anthony Kirkland, he exhibited before this accident to his head, this traumatic brain injury. What are you making of this cross-examination now?
Right. Well, importantly, Dr. Wu said that these injuries, though, existed prior to 2004 as a result of Anthony Kirkland suffering abuse at the hands of his temperamental and alcoholic father. So I think Dr. Wu effectively rebutted that argument in saying that these injuries existed prior to this accident. I find it interesting that the prosecutor is focusing on the fact that these scans that were ordered by Dr. Wu took place in Ohio, and Dr. Wu didn't travel to Ohio. He didn't expressly communicate with the folks in Ohio who conducted these scans. He doesn't know if Anthony Kirkland was on medication at the time these scans were conducted. Now, I think common sense dictates that that doesn't matter. These are relatively routine medical procedures, and hopefully the defense will have an opportunity on redirect to address those issues.
And we'll have to see what happens on redirect. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your insight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going live into the Anthony Kirkland case.